Because we're recording, I'm going to do this in English. So welcome everybody. I hope you all had a nice bratwurst. I had two. We're going to talk about 3 subjects today. First up is upgrading. Then we're going to talk about auctioning, and afterwards neural networking. But first, I'd like to invite you all to the new Mendix Slack. I've heard we have over 1,000 participants at the moment, which is great, but the more the merrier. So yeah, let's just join in the Slack. I'm going to talk about upgrading a Mendix application from version 4 to 7, and it's not a regular Mendix application. That's why we want to show you this as a use case. There are a lot of people in this room who have worked on this application, so I really hope I have my facts straight. I'm looking at those 2 people right there. Yeah, let's see, right? Okay, yeah. So the goal here is not to get a deep dive into the functional area of this application, but to show you guys some tips and some troubles we've encountered, and maybe you have experienced a similar use case, and we can share some tips and tricks with you guys. First, some background info. It's a simulation application which uses the Monte-Carlo principle, which basically means is that you run the same simulation multiple times, but each time with different start conditions. And you can set it up with a wide array of different parameters, which could be technical or economic, for instance, prices that can change. And when you start a simulation, you can decide how many runs it has, which can go from 1 to 500 or even more. The application is only used a couple of times per year by our client and a partner of theirs. Some of the logic is also built in custom Java, for instance, for shared resources, and sometimes with extensive simulations, the client has to wait for more than 24 hours for a result to pop up, which are interesting facts. So yeah, why would you do an upgrade of V4 to V7? Well, of course you have to deal with security standards, exceptionally if you work with an application that's being used by multiple companies. And we see that in a lot of those versions we see deprecated functionality, and some of the versions aren't even supported yet anymore by Mendix. There were some trials with V5 and V6, but those gave a lot of performance issues. And V7 and higher what would give us a prospect that would say, yeah, this should be able to work. One condition from the client was simulations. We don't want to them to take more any longer than they did before, and yeah, if you guys can try, make them faster. Well, yeah, of course. So first thing we did, and I know Sander knows a lot about this, was try to make the runs parallel of each other. So instead of let them wait until the previous one ran out, basically, try to run of the simulations simultaneously. We use the process queue for that and some custom Java, and then we could execute multiple runs by using multiple threads. And also a thing that that was very handy basically was to save our IDs on the sub-entities, because if you try to retrieve by association when parallel running, you can get data logs. In theory, this means the table below that you run your simulation in way less time than you did before. If I go too fast, or if you have any questions, please say so. Well, then we actually performed the upgrade. You can't do it in one go. You have to do it by steps, because there is a lot in the structure and the data types that has changed throughout the years already in the versions. And with each step, we would need to perform tests, performance tests, with different simulations on different environments, because locally the simulations would perform way different than on, for instance, cloud-based or Azure-based. And we really try to switch between using, for instance, 4 threads or 8 threads or 60 threads. But this was very dependent on the number of processors we could use in our machines. And sometimes we needed to migrate the deprecated items, for instance, float to decimal, to name an example. And there we, for example, had some issues with migrating the database, which would take 24 days if we would let it do in the normal upgrade cycle of Mendix. But we built a custom SQL script that took only 12 hours. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Of course, we had some bottlenecks. We saw that in version 7, the data being processed within the custom Java had a much higher impact on the memory usage than it did in version 4. Which was mostly due to the multi-threading, so the parallel processing, and the conversion of these data types. So a lot more data was being processed by this custom Java. And we saw that a simulation would slow down as it progressed through the runs. So for instance, at first, the first 8 would take 4 minutes, but then at the next 8 it would take half an hour or something. And we saw that it was due to one particular Java package, which was due to the aggregation and the random numbering that was used for our parallel processing. So we needed to figure out what was happening and how we could, get behind the cause of this, because we saw that a lot of unnecessary amounts of data was being created, and this had a big impact on memory usage. So we use a tool for that. I think the full name is Eclipse Memory Analyzer, with that tool, you can analyze your heap dumps and can see what's really going on in the Java. Also, to take in mind, when you upgrade from v4 to v7, your styling will dramatically change, but, well, I guess you all know that. A little bit more about the memory analyzer. Well, you should really use this if you have custom Java in your application, no matter if you do, because you can get good insight in what's going on. It helps you find memory leaks. And you can analyze these productive heap dumps, and it will quickly give you a report of all the Mendix objects that are being created and processed. My colleague will show us an example of the actual application where we used Memory Analyzer. I'm going to stand really close to him.
It's going to be another application, but I'm going to give you an. I'm going to give you a short demo on how to use the Memory Analyzer tool. This tool is, as Mina already said, it's mostly used if you have memory issues where your memory keeps on growing and growing and growing, and you don't understand which data type is actually causing it. Then the Memory Analyzer tool is a good solution. So how do you do it? If you're in the Eclipse Memory Analyzer, then you go to File, you do Acquire Heap Dump. What it then does, it starts looking for Java applications on your computer, and you can actually attach the tool to it. Here is the actual Mendix runtime. So I click on it. I do. In this case, I can do finish. And at this point, what it's actually doing, it's creating a copy of what's now in your memory, and it stores it to a dump. So you can then use that dump to analyze it. Well, in this case, I already have a dump which I created earlier. This is where you end up then. If you go then to histogram, and then here go to class name, and now I have to peek on what I had to fill in, but it's this one. It's com.mendix.basis.objectmanagement.mendix identifier. So, hold on. Oh, wait. Yeah, thanks. Then I see the amount of Mendix identifier objects that are currently in the memory. If I then right-click on it and then Java Basics group by value, and then I think it was object type. Yeah. Okay. Lowercase.
Lowercase? Lowercase.
Oh.
Object type.
With a capital T? Yeah. Then I get thanks. Then I get a list of all the entities that are currently now in memory. So currently, this is a really small application which I just started locally, so there is not that much objects. But kind of here I have 8 orders currently in memory. I have now 4 bit objects in memory, and here I can analyze actually what's now in my memory. And I think in most cases, and this is currently in applications which consist mostly of persistent entities, but this is especially handy when you have non-persistent entities, because those are the entity types which take the most memory space in your applications. So yeah, that's the analyze tool.
Cool, thanks.
So ideally you would be running your application for some time and start using it intensively maybe, or just like normal usage, or then do the dump?
I think intensively, especially with multiple users, because if we're speaking about non-persistent entities, then most of the time it's because multiple people are using the application and non-persistent entities are created per user session. And then I think it would be wise to create a dump and check the dump. But in this case, the tool only works if you're running on premise. I'm not sure if you can actually do this also from the cloud version. I think not. But yeah, that's ideal. And then you can check, okay, what's in memory. Although, if you don't have memory issues in your application, then I don't think you need to run the application at all. I think if the memory keeps on growing, then in most cases what happens is the garbage collector gets there and will try to clear it up. Or did I now steal your...
No, it's totally fine.
So then the garbage collector will clean it up, and there will come new space available, and then so then it's not a problem. The problem is when your memory keeps on growing, but the amount of free space it can create starts shrinking. That's actually when you want to use this tool and actually understand, okay, why can't it clean these things up?
Okay, thanks. So yeah, really short example of a use case and which we encountered, and well, this gave us a lot of insight. Yeah, whenever you hesitate using it, just use the memory analyzer and you get a long way. That's basically it. Question?
Yes, you use a specific migration path. How did you come up to this kind of Mendix versions to come from V4 to V7? So why did you, for instance, skip the 4.7 to? I saw a list of Mendix versions.
Yeah, you're right. That's over here. I'm gonna look at the person who actually did the upgrade.
Well, I think this is also I think this is also a little bit the path that Mendix also advises you to do when upgrading. I think when you start upgrading from one version to another, it first says take the latest version of your current version and then go to the next. I think there's one exception, which is I think around 6 actually, where they change the UI, the Atlas UI. Therefore, you need to take a step in between. But in this case also, I think we did also these steps because also there were already some branches which consisted of these versions, where we had to merge current functionalities inside of the current branch. Therefore, we were kind of already binded to these versions.
Other questions? Yep.
Can you name an example where the custom SQL helped you instead of using normal database migration?
So the question was an example where we would use a custom SQL script instead of the database migration of Mendix itself.
I think this was a really special case because of the amount of doubles being converted to decimals. The script that Mendix generates is automatically generated, which doesn't mean it's always the most effective script there is, but it is probably the most secure and the most easy one to generate. And therefore, because of the large amount of data which is in the database, waiting 24 days before your conversion is done is not something you can actually do. Because for example, what if Mendix update starts after 12 days and you can start over again? But yeah, that's not something you want to run into.
But you would download the database, run the script, and then upload it again.
I'm not sure.
What happened is we have tables which contains about 100 floats, and it was a table of 10 or 20 million records. What the normal script does is renames an attributes, then copy all the values from one attribute to the other one, and then rename the attributes again. And this script created an empty table, and then did an insert into of the complete data.
On the server.
On the database.
Yeah, on the server.
On the production database.
Yeah.
No more questions? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.